At the end of the parsha, on the words Vayomos Terach B'choron, Terach dies in Choron, Rashi explains on the word B'choron that the final nun of the word is upside down. It is to teach you that until Avram there was Charon, the word Choron similar to anger, there was Hashem's anger in the world. Now seemingly Rashi should have connected the anger with Terach. The word B'choron is in the words Vayomos Terach B'choron. Why is it that Rashi is saying until Avram there's anger? So the explanation, says the Rebbe, is simple. Since the pasuk is speaking about the death of Terach, if we would say that it's associated with Terach, that means the death of Terach, there was anger, till the death of Terach, that wouldn't fit with something else that Rashi teaches us, that Terach actually did tshuva a long time before he died. And this is why Rashi says, number one, that the anger is Hashem's anger is in the world. It's not connected to Terach. So why then is it being associated with Vayomos Terach B'choron? This is why Rashi is saying that it's until Avram there's the anger. In other words, the upside down nun by B'choron is connected to the next pasuk, the one that follows right in the beginning of the following parsha. Vayomer Hashem el Avram lech lecha, where Hashem is telling Avram to go to Eretz Yisrael, etc. This is why he says, until Avram there's the anger, but once Avram Avinu comes and he starts illuminating the world with godliness, then there's no longer Hashem's anger. However, says the Rebbe, we still need to understand, yes, it's true that the pasuk about Avram is right after this word B'choron, but why should the final nun of B'choron be hinting to the following pasuk, to the next pasuk of the next parsha? So the Rebbe explains the whole idea of a final letter. And in our case, the final nun represents that this is the ending. This is the ending of a word or the ending of a concept, of a certain idea. The Rebbe says this is especially true with the final nun, that the shape of the nun is one long line without any breaks or pauses in the middle, which represents as a complete interruption. And this is what we're saying over here in the word B'choron. That on the one hand, Charon is the word that shows on anger. It has that final nun and the upside down final nun that represents that it also has this meaning of anger in addition to being a name of a place. But at the same time, there's a break over here, a pause, saying this is the end of the anger. That's what the final nun is. The anger is stopping now, and that's why Rashi tells us that until Avram, there was the anger, but no longer. The Rebbe says we still need to understand. Why does Rashi have to say it in that way? Sort of saying until when the anger was, which is more like the negative, when there's no more anger, when the anger stopped, that it's until Avram. Why doesn't Rashi say that the anger is until the end of Parshas Noach? There is anger. Why are we focusing more on that till Avram there's anger and no longer? Why don't we just say the anger is now till the end of Noach? So the Rebbe says because really we can't say the anger is until the end of Parshas Noach. Because again, the Parshas Noach finishes with the passing of Terach. Now, Terach actually dies 60 years after what the next Parsha, starting with Avram Avinu going to Eretz Yisrael. He dies more than 60 years later. And the anger, we said, stops when Avram Avinu comes, when Avram Avinu is starting to illuminate the world. That means it really is before Terach passes away. And that's why Rashi says it in this way, not till the end of Noach is there anger, because really at the end of Noach there's already no more anger, because during the lifetime of Terach there's already no longer anger. And Rashi says until Avram there was anger but no more. It's just being hinted in the end, in those words, B'choron at the end of the previous parsha. Now, why in fact does the Torah even have to tell us that there is Hashem's anger until these generations in all the generations until Avram? Especially that this should be something simply and obvious anyways, that these people were such big sinners and so on, that of course Hashem is not happy with them. And the explanation is because when we learn about these generations and we see their tremendous arichus yamim, how long they lived, and we know that they're very, very big rishoyim, so we might think that even though they sinned, but there was still something positive about them, some special zechuyos, maybe their achdus or other things. And that's why the Torah emphasizes that not only wasn't Hashem happy with them, but on the opposite. As long as these generations were around, there's Hashem's anger in the world. Are you going to say, so why are they living world so long? Well, that's what Hashem decided. Or you could say, says the Rebbe al Pi Pshat, you could say Hashem created Adam Orishain, handcrafted Adam Orishain. He surely should have lived very, very long. Again, if not for the Chet Tzadas. And the closer those generations are to him, are still living much longer times than the later generations. But, says the Rebbe, Rashi doesn't actually give us a reason why they lived long, these generations. But in truth, the Rashi is hinting, according to Soid, according to the Kabbalistic and Chassidus meaning of the idea, Rashi is hinting in his words why they lived so long. And that is, the Gemara says that those first 26 generations were sustained by the kindness of Hashem, by the chesed of Hashem. In other words, they didn't have their own deserving merits why they should exist, but Hashem is doing it with His kindness. According to Chassidus, what this means is that those generations were receiving from a less level of Hashem's chesed, which is completely higher than Ishtalshalus, higher than all calculations and so on. And therefore, even if they're not doing their avodah, it's a place where the whole concept of mitzvahs, haveiros, avodah is sort of really doesn't have much of an impact. Once Matan Torah starts, now everything starts with a specific calculation of how Hashem's hashpah, Hashem's chayis energy is going to come into the world. In truth, however, says the Rebbe, there is a difference between the first 20 generations out of those 26, that means the first 20 until Avraham, and the last 6 generations starting from Avraham, who's already starting what we call the Shnei Alafim, the 2 millennia of Torah. And this is actually what Rashi is hinting to when he says until Avraham, there was Charoin Af. Why does Rashi emphasize the word Af? Why does he tell us the word Af? The word Charon is connected to Charoin. So why does Rashi put in also the word Charoin Af? Because really in the word Charon, which is connected to the word Chara, there's really 2 ideas. There could be Charoin Af, which is anger, but the word Charon and Chara are also related, as Rashi himself tells us elsewhere, to the expression, a pasuk as well, Nichar Groini, which literally means my throat is feeling all dry. What is the idea of the throat? The throat is usually that passageway to allow between the brain coming down, the flow of energy down into the heart, or the intellect coming into emotions. When the throat is dry, it represents that it's not allowing for that flow of energy to go down from the intellect into the emotions. So now, in the language of Ishtalshalus, that would mean there's a time that there's a flow coming down from Chachma into the Midos. Nichar Groini, connected to the word Chara, or Charon, would mean that it's not allowing that energy to flow through. But, says the Rebbe, in the first 20 generations, this translation of Chara wouldn't apply, because they were receiving from such a high level of Ishtalshalus that's way, way higher than the Sphira of Chachma. And that's why Rashi says it's not the level of Nichar Groini where we're worried about an interruption between Chachma and the Midos, because these are people that are getting from way higher than Chachma. So Rashi says here we're translating Charon related to Chara Af. Af literally means the nose. Now the nose is associated with a sense of smell, with scent, which is deeper and higher than the level of Chachma. This is the level that's completely higher than Ishtalshalus. And that's what Rashi is telling us, that those 20 generations until Avraham comes, they are getting from the level of Chara Af, or Af, the level of Chara, the way it's related to Af, meaning the level of the scent, that level of Elikus that's completely higher than Ishtalshalus, until Avraham Avinu comes, which starts the 2 millennia of Torah. And now, once the great oil, that's true, it's higher than Ishtalshalus still, but it's starting to be drawn down, what we call a pnimis, in a more internal way, through the avodah of Torah, etc. And Avraham Avinu, now there's no longer any room for the klipos to be able to receive their sustenance. Now it's no longer just an oil that comes to everyone, even to sinners. And this is also hinted specifically in the nun, in that final nun of the word Charon. A final nun generally, which is a letter on the one hand, which represents 50, nun is 50, represents what we call the 50th gate of wisdom, higher than Ishtalshalus. On the other hand, it's a nun, a final nun is a long line coming down very, very low, representing that on the one hand, it's an oil that's coming very high, but since it's already being drawn down in the kedusha itself is coming down in a particular way, in a pnimiyistic way, all the way down to the lowest level. It's not allowing the klipa to be able to receive any chayis and for sinners to get chayis, and therefore it only comes to kedusha. All of this is, of course, a preparation to the time of Mashiach, where on the one hand we're going to have the greatest oiris, the greatest energy coming down of Hashem, from Hashem, but the Hashem is going to remove all the impurity. None of the klipa will be able to receive chayis, all being bevias Mashiach tzedkeinu b'karev mamash.